And now let's talk about the use of juxtaposition and rhythm in First Man. Something that was very important to Damien Chazelle with First Man was the juxtaposition of what Damien referred to as the moon and the kitchen sink, the moon and the kitchen. And what he meant by that was that he knew the power of the movie from a story point of view would be how well we balanced the mission and space capsule scenes, the astronaut scenes, with the kitchen, with the earthbound scenes with Neil Armstrong and his wife, played by Claire Foy, and his children. You have the space missions, which are fantastic and literally out of this world, and you balance that with things that are ordinary, with things that are mundane. He knew that the power of the story would have to do with the right balance of that. In a way, it's the oldest film editing trick in the book. Show the character, show his face, juxtapose it with a point of view, what he's looking at, what he or she is looking at, and then go back to it for a reaction. It's very simple, but it's extremely effective. It's an effective way of getting your audience into the shoes of the character. And Damien was great in that he knew he needed these pieces, so we would get these amazing shots, subjective shots that he would hold. And some of this is done in a very cinema verite documentary style. And that's the other thing Damien really wanted. He really wanted the audience to feel like a fly on the wall, eavesdropping in the Armstrong home, but also eavesdropping in the space capsules. And so he filmed it like a documentary. He would, in terms of filming, he knew he would have to get certain pieces of information, but he would let his camera people, he would let Lena Sandgren, the cinematographer who he worked with on La La Land, he would let him capture the event, capture the action like a documentary camera person. And that meant instead of all the smooth camera moves we had in La La Land, we had handheld messiness. But that was okay for this story. That was okay for the style. And we took our time with this and we leaned into the subjective because we knew that that would be a way of getting the audience invested, making the audience feel like they're inside the capsule. All the while you hear these radio comms. Now we start seeing what he's seeing. Pieces, inserts, which are great because they give texture to this capsule they've just gotten in. But they're also important rhythmic building blocks. They're starting to create momentum in a certain way. So we took our time with it. It was okay that this sequence is protracted, is long. That's okay. That's all right because we want something measured. Because we know that that creates a certain sort of anticipation with the audience. So you're hearing all these radio comms, these voices from radios. So that's sometimes to give us information, like when it says there's a countdown. But it's also, like here it's information. We also want to see these close-ups, these details, because it also shows us how primitive these crafts are, how machine age they are instead of space age. And here is something, again, this is the use of inserts to show the process they're being buckled in, but it's also to do something rhythmic by the sound of these things being buckled in. Because you know that that's going to create a certain anticipation with the viewer. And again, when you have a shot like this, a beautiful shot like this, I always try to set these up with eyes or a face. You set it up. And the sound helps immensely because the sound tells you how heavy the door is. And this is okay that it's black for a moment. We cut it that way. We let it stay in black just for a moment. So then when the sound of the door closes and it disappears, it's okay that it's mysterious. And we have POV, but it's important that we pan over, we see the other astronaut. It's important now we answer it with Neil again. Now we can go into his close-up of his eyes. And incidentally, all this is also LED. So that's LED of the gantry being pulled away, in camera reflected in Ryan Gosling's visor and in his eyes. We've been in tight. Now is time to we can pull out a little bit just to establish enough of the spacecraft. And we can cut to this angle and then cut to another wide. This is the widest type of thing we have. Generally, we have things very tight. But now is the time to do this because we're finishing a certain section of being strapped into the capsule and we're moving on to a different part of the scene. So it's okay to put a punctuation on it. And that's something that we liked. We liked having the same type of size, a two-shot, but answering it with a different angle.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, check out.
It's okay to do this, to cut to these wider shots at this point in the story because we know that what's coming up with the launch, we're gonna do the opposite. We're gonna stay really close. So to avoid cinematic redundancy, you want to be able to vary it up in a lot of cases, and this is our place to do that. We set up a detail of him putting the mirror where you're going to see a reflection that's going to tell you when we've launched. Again, sound helps immensely, but we always wanted this to play pictorially, cinematically. So we know here, when he looks away, it's key. You lead the audience with the looks, with your editing. You lead the audience. You set up that he's looking at one thing, and you answer it with his look. Now, why does he look away? You're leading the audience to your next little story beat. This also was something I had to do that was different from La La Land. I had to cut the picture in a way to make room for sound in a way that we didn't on La La Land. I had to make room for the sound of the creaks and the sound of the fly, the housefly. And it's strange, it's bizarre. Did it really happen? Was there really a fly? I don't really know. I don't think any of us know. But it doesn't matter. It's strange. It's bizarre. It helps with the character's emotion. It's disorienting. And again here, we made room for the creaking, the metal groaning. And the characters can look at each other. The looks between characters like that cannot be overstated. We've set up the little mirror that he's put there. So now we've set it up. We've spent time with it so we understand what it is, and that can play out and pay off momentarily. But also, we set up this countdown. When you hear the countdown going, we show these little details. We stay very tight. We even punch in close so that when there's the impact, of the ignition, we can cut to this wider size to open things up, to feel the impact of that more. We've set up this subjective nature, the POV, and we've set it up in a very slow, patient, methodical way with walking up to the Gemini capsule so you would understand the language of looks and subjective POV. Now that we've set it up patiently, we can now go more into pictorial abstraction, and it's okay because we've set it up. This shot, for example, these shots, I don't even know what parts of the spacecraft this is, but we just liked how hard these edges looked, how dangerous it looked, and we supported that with the sound of the creaking at that point. And here we're very reliant on the storytelling with the windows. And that's something Damien and his crew worked very hard to get right, which is to show all the different transitions outside the window of the sky changing. And so we're very reliant on that. And here, again, as in the X-15, the opening scene, we're very reliant on insert shots to show you, in the case of this scene, to show the altitude going almost into this abstraction. The altitude meter, they're going up so violently and so fast that you can't even read what the meter says. That's part of the point. And we answer that by cutting to a shot of a close-up of Ryan Gosling where it is abstract. And again, what was really important to Damien was to play this all inside the capsule. He never wanted to go outside. He wanted this to play internally. And always going back to the windows to really show the progression. That was important. And the eyes, of course, the eyes, always the eyes. And this was something that we knew, because the picture was getting so abstract, it was a place where we could just build a crescendo of sound, which we did with rocket sounds, but again with animal sounds. And we built this sonic crescendo so that we could basically tee up this single insert shot of a switch, which was going to take you into this rollover. And now we've earned this place where now we can float. Everything can float, everything can slow down. The scene has progressed to this. Again, it has to do with contrast. The launch builds sonically in a way that the sound is deafening. It's a cacophony. And because you build that, when you go to this moment where things change and they roll over and you go into everything floating, now we're weightless. We see the mirror that's been blown off is now floating. Now, the sound changes so drastically that you can hear. The point is, the sound is so different, the feeling is so different. You can hear every little move of the suit. So those things are very important to hear. And now we cut to complete silence, nothing on the soundtrack. So we've built to this. Now we can have Justin Hurwitz's music come in, but not right away. We waited. We wanted to wait and give a moment of silence, a moment of pause, so that you could really feel where we had come from, feel how you'd have context for how violent and loud and brutal the launch was. And now, the important juxtaposition, out of this world into something very ordinary and mundane as children. And again, this shot like a fly on the wall eavesdropping in the Armstrongs' house. Now inside the bathroom. And all this material was shot. These scenes are scripted. The actors are doing what's in the script, but the camera is shooting in a documentary fashion. It's very different from La La Land. It's handheld, and part of my editing in this was different in that with this type of footage, because we were going for this type of style, and this will play on a little bit more. I'll show you something. I'll show you another example of it, where I'm allowed to use certain imperfections. I'm allowed to use certain messiness. So because I'm allowed to do that, it actually allows me to use performances and moments that I might not otherwise use. If the camera is racking focus or it's rough, the move is rough. In another movie, I wouldn't be able to use that because that would be a different language than the movie is told in. But this is the language of the movie. So it actually allowed us different possibilities than we had on La La Land or Whiplash.